Hello, today I'm going to talk to you about our overdependence on China for trade and how China being a very important trade power can lead to some very significant overdependence on China, especially from the United States. So, as you probably know, pretty much every product that we see on the market nowadays has the label "Made in China" on it, and the reason that this is so common is because of China's enormous industrial base, their globalization of economics and trade, and the fact that they control the market share for a lot of products worldwide. So the United States, unfortunately, has become very overdependent and very reliant on China for their trade and for their industry. We end up buying so many products from them, and so do so many other countries. So, what are some reasons for this? One of these one of these reasons is supply distributions, right? China has so much of the supply of all of these products that it's very hard to source them from other countries, say European countries, African countries, other Asian countries, and most of those countries, with some exceptions, aren't really known for their industrial base in the same manner that China is. And another thing are rare earth metals and other critical minerals and just goods in general that China is naturally suited to be able to provide. The United States does have a lot of rare earth metal deposits, but China has built up the industry that allows them to actually access and refine those deposits, which are very useful for their industry and makes the United States and other countries more over reliant on them because certain products require these specialized materials. And this creates two main issues here. China will gain leverage and China gains bargaining power. Both of those are very significant on the world stage, especially because of how important economics are and how closely linked global economies are, especially the United States and China. So, what are some solutions, right? So obviously, this all of these issues come from the way that global trade works and how the global trade function on the global stage between the United States and China, between the US and Europe, between the US and Mexico, right? Everything is intertwined, and China is at the center of it all. China, as I mentioned before, has an enormous manufacturing base. They can manufacture a whole host of products. They can do it quickly, they can do it cheaply, which is a very hard thing to compete with when you're thinking about European countries, the United States, Mexico, African countries, other Asian countries. A lot of those countries simply struggle to compete with this scale and the efficiency that China can output. The cheap, fast production will drive up the supply, and then China can drop their prices, which just increases demand, and you have a positive feedback loop where China just continues to gain more and more influence because they are more and more used in global trade. And this creates a lot of supply chains that are built around China specifically. And I'm going to keep hammering on this point because it's very significant. China, because of how centered they are in global trade, because of how significant they are and critical to so many different products, they have an enormous amount of leverage. And a good example of this would be their Belt and Road Initiative, where they have industrialized a lot of different areas in Africa and other Asian countries. They basically come in, invest a lot of money, capital, and build up a lot of industry for these countries. And then that allows them to have a lot of leverage over these countries because they help them so much, and then they can reap those gains later. So, what are some solutions, right, to this problem? And let's take it from a United States perspective. So, what the United States can do is number one, diversify the suppliers, right? If China is the number one supplier of so many of our products, and if they hold so much market share, we need to look to other sources. A good example would be Europe. The EU has a very powerful manufacturing base. Obviously, it cannot compete with China one to one, but it is a good start. And if we start leaning on them, especially because they're our allies much more than China is, then it can start to loosen our dependency on China and unravel the dependency that the United States has on the Chinese economy. We can focus on building production inside the United States. Domestic production can be very, very important. If we invest in a lot of production here, we can create lots of jobs, we can loosen our ties with China, and we don't even have to rely on any other countries. And any politician will tell you that that's just a really, really good thing in all respects. Build regional production. Don't even have to go overseas. We've got Mexico right south of us, and Mexico is one of our biggest trading partners, and they also have a pretty significant industrial base. If we can turn to them, they can help us with so many imports. And working with allies like the EU and other Asian countries. Two Asian countries that are close allies with the US come to mind here: Japan and the Republic of South Korea. The Republic of Korea, especially, has an incredible manufacturing base considering their small geographical size and their unfortunate position on the world stage. It's impressive how much they've able to contribute to the global economy. And Japan, especially, Japan is known for very highly advanced technology. Cars are a good example, which doesn't sound like highly advanced technology, but they have been doing it for so long and have such a monopoly on cars that we can turn away from the EV vehicles that China is putting out and go back to Japan as a potential option. And the biggest thing here is to try to build resilience instead of isolation. Isolation would be cutting ourselves off from China, which would have drastic effects for the American economy and, of course, the Chinese economy. But we can build resilience into our supply chains and into the United States' economy by relying on our European partners, for example, our allies in Asia, South Korea and Japan, Mexico, which is a regional power that we are closely allied with, and of course, investing in domestic production. So, in conclusion, China very much matters, but we can start to rely less on China for our trade, and we can avoid all of the made in China labels that we have been seeing so often. So I pulled from a few key sources here. The World Trade Organization, I really liked their World Trade Statistics 2025 when I was preparing for this speech. OECD, their Global Value and Supply Chains, was very useful as well. And the WTO, the World Trade Organization, their World Trade Report 2024, Trade and Inclusiveness, was also very helpful. Thank you very much.